Hey guys, and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different compared to the content that I typically make. So, throughout the college basketball regular season, I'd release videos on a daily basis where I picked a handful of games and gave you my reasoning on who I thought was going to cover against the spread. I'm going to be making a lot of those types of videos for the NCAA tournament, but just for this specific video, I'm going to go through and give you, some of the double-digit seeded teams that I think have a decent shot to win their first-round game. And when I say a decent shot, I'm talking about teams that have like at least about a 35% chance to win. Maybe in that 35 to 55% chance range to pick up the win in their first-round game. If there's games where I don't think the lower seeded team has any chance, I'll either just skip over it or I might just mention it real quick. But got a handful of games I'm going to be talking about in this video. But just as a preface to this, if you're interested in getting pick content, not just in college basketball, but across all sorts of different major American sports, you can hit that subscribe button. And you can head on over to our main website, stumpthespread.com. And over there, you can get our daily free picks as well as just our top confidence plays across all major American sports. We cover the NFL, college football, college basketball, NBA, MLB, and NHL. So if you're interested, you can go check that out. And I'll throw a link to Stump the Spread down in the video description. So heading right into this, also down in the video description, I'll put a list of the particular games that I discuss in this video. So jumping on in here, we have Virginia versus UNC Wilmington. This is a veteran UNC Wilmington squad that was in the NCAA tournament last year and gave their first-round opponent Duke just everything that they could handle. And I actually think this UNC Wilmington squad is even better than they were last year. Bring back a lot of veteran talent, a team that's tournament tested now, and coming into this matchup against Virginia, going to be interesting here. UNC Wilmington is one of the best offensive mid-major teams in the nation. They ranking right around that 10th area in the nation in terms of their scoring average, and that's got to be really scary for Virginia, given that Virginia ranks sub 300 in the nation in terms of their scoring average. Obviously, the difference comes in the fact that Virginia is the number one defensive team in the nation, while UNC Wilmington is much higher than that, more in that 200 range. But if UNC Wilmington gets hot from the three-point arc, they can put a scare into Virginia here. The Cavaliers play great defense, but another thing that Virginia doesn't have going for them is the fact that they don't really have that go-to guy necessarily on the offensive end. Maybe you could say Prentice is that guy, but they really spread the ball around to about 9 or 10 different guys. And even though Virginia is very deep and they bring that defensive intensity throughout the full 40 minutes, I am concerned about their ability to put up, solid numbers on the offensive side of the ball. While UNC Wilmington, very high ceiling on the offensive end. Coming to this one, I feel like UNC Wilmington at least has about a 40% chance to win this game, and it's one of those 12-5 seed matchups where the 12 certainly has their chances, especially if things go right for them in terms of their particular matchup advantages in this case. Right below that, we have Florida versus East Tennessee State. East Tennessee State, another veteran group, but East Tennessee State isn't one of your, normal run-of-the-mill mid-major squads. They've been able to bring in some very strong recruits from other programs. For instance, they brought in Glass from Wichita State, as well as Mascara Perea from Indiana, as well as returning quite a bit of veteran talent from last year's team that won about 20 games last year, but been even better this year. We've been pretty high on this East Tennessee State squad throughout the regular season. Coming into this one against the Florida Gators, and Florida, they've been having themselves a really solid year coming out of the SEC. One thing that Florida doesn't necessarily have going for them is they don't have any really elite players on their team in terms of potential NBA prospects. Florida really spreads the ball around and can share amongst a bunch of different scoring options, but they don't really have that alpha dog that can just go and take over games. I do expect Florida to just eke this one out, but I feel like East Tennessee State has at least about a 35% chance of pulling the upset in this one. Just given the fact that they're one of the more athletic teams in the mid-majors, and they can ball with a squad like Florida, who doesn't necessarily have, a bunch of elite NBA talent on their particular roster. Below that, we have SMU, and they're going to play the winner of Providence USC. For this one, I feel like USC is going to win that first game, and if it is USC against SMU, I feel like USC is going to have a pretty decent chance at picking up this win. I've been a fan of this USC squad. They have some decent depth in terms of what they're able to do scoring the ball. They have 4 guys averaging at least 12 points per games, and USC can really exploit different matchups on the court. They don't necessarily need to lean on one particular guy, but if they were to lean on one guy, they do have Benny Boatwright, who spent a good portion of the regular season on the sidelines, but he's been put back in the lineup, and now he's leading the team in scoring. And USC doesn't just have to rely on Boatwright, though. They have a number of other guys that can score the ball. Coming in here against SMU, the Mustangs had themselves a tremendous regular season. One of the better defensive teams in the nation. A little bit more hit and miss on the offensive end. And one thing that concerns me about SMU is they don't have the greatest depth. If they face any kind of foul trouble or injury concerns, that's going to be a big issue for SMU in this tournament. And also this USC squad, I really like the makeup of their team. They have solid bigs. They have a veteran point guard who's been around the block and can definitely play cool under pressure situations. With that being the case, I feel like USC has a pretty solid chance here, and I'd put them at about a 50% chance of winning this particular matchup against SMU if they do go on to face the Mustangs. Don't really see any other double-digit seeded teams that I'm all that strong on. And, Marquette, they have a strong offense. South Carolina, very strong defense, but I feel like defense will prevail in that particular matchup, so I'm going to skip over that one. Moving on over here to the other side of the bracket. All right, it's going on down here. I think Rhode Island coming to this one has a pretty solid opportunity to pick up a win against Creighton. The Rhode Island Rams brought back a lot of veteran talent this season. They were ranked in the top 25 coming into the year. They never really lived up to those ultimate expectations until more recently. Rhode Island has really been able to crank things up over the past month, and they're finally looking like the team everyone was expecting back during the month of November. And it was really frustrating for a large chunk of the regular season, but Rhode Island finally showing, the potential that everyone thought they had. Coming to this one against Creighton, Creighton's been playing quite a while now without their star point guard, Watson, and Creighton hasn't been near the threat that they were when Watson was on the court. I think that plays a factor here, and Rhode Island much better on the defensive end than Creighton. Obviously, Creighton has a bit higher ceiling on the offensive side of the ball, but I put Rhode Island's chances at winning this one at about 55%. I think they have a tremendous chance here as the 11 seed to go on and pick up this win here. All right, moving on down here, Oklahoma State against Michigan. It was really great seeing Michigan make that run through the Big Ten tournament, winning 4 games in 4 days. And, picking up wins against some of the top teams in the conference like Purdue as well as Wisconsin. Coming to this one, it seems like in the past, whenever we see teams do really well in their conference tournament, it doesn't necessarily always translate into success in the NCAA tournament. I feel like this can be a tough matchup for Michigan. Michigan's a team that really likes to play slow and efficient basketball in the half court, but Oklahoma State is a frenetic, fast-paced team that has ranked right among the top teams in college basketball this year in terms of their offensive output. I think this is going to be a really tricky matchup for the Wolverines going in here against an Oklahoma State team that, over in the Big Ten, Michigan doesn't have all that much experience against teams that like to play just at a frenetic pace. The Big Ten tends to cater more towards defense and playing in the half court, but I feel like Oklahoma State's going to have a pretty solid chance here at picking up the win. I'm going to give them about a 50 to 55% chance here at picking up this win here against the Wolverines. All right, guys, scrolling on down here, working our way down. Over on the west side of the bracket, I don't see a ton of double-digit seeds that are going to have a chance at, necessarily picking up that first-round win. Just one matchup I'll touch on quickly here, Notre Dame and Princeton. This is a Princeton team that returned all of their starters from last year's team, although they do have an injury with Caruso, who's been out for a large chunk this year. But still, nonetheless, one of the teams that, even though Princeton didn't necessarily put up the greatest results back during the non-conference, they've been on a really hot streak working their way through the Ivy League, and they were able to close things out in their last outing against Yale to get into the NCAA tournament. But Princeton has a lot of veteran experience coming into this one against a Notre Dame squad who, even though Notre Dame does come out of the ACC the ACC, they don't have the kind of physicality in terms of, just big, bulky, physical guys down low, and that can help a team like Princeton, who also, they aren't able to recruit, 7-footers or extremely athletic guys, and going into a first-round matchup against a team that will have, players that are a similar size and athletic ability. Obviously, Notre Dame a bit more athletic than Princeton, but won't be physically imposing, and I think that plays into Princeton's hand, although I do feel like Notre Dame's probably going to get the win here. This is one of those 12-5 seed matchups where the 12 seed can definitely come through. Also, with what we saw at the Ivy League last year, Yale picking up that first-round upset win against Baylor, and then in the next round after that, giving Duke just everything that they could handle. So the Ivy League has definitely gone on to outplay expectations, it seems, more often than not, especially in recent years. So I feel like Princeton, coming into this one, has about a 35% chance to pick up this upset here against Notre Dame. All right, and moving on to the other side of the bracket. Like I said, I'm not all that high on the other double-digit seeds on that west side of the bracket. So moving on over to the south. Coming on over here, here's a really great matchup here. We have the 12 seed Middle Tennessee State against Minnesota. I feel like Middle Tennessee State's a little bit underseeded here. I feel like the Blue Raiders could have been easily a 10 seed, but the committee siding with just giving them a 12. This is a team everyone remembers last year in the NCAA tournament as a 15 seed, went on to beat a Big Ten opponent, Michigan State, in that first round. They get another Big Ten opponent here in Minnesota. Minnesota banged themselves up a little bit in the Big Ten tournament. That's slightly a concern coming into the big dance. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but not a Minnesota team that has, tournament experience. The veteran Middle Tennessee State Blue Raiders definitely bringing in more March Madness experience into this matchup. It's been great to see what Minnesota's been able to do this year in terms of being one of the worst teams in the Big Ten last year and then turning things around and becoming one of the best teams in the Big Ten this year. But coming into this matchup against a Middle Tennessee State squad that's been there, done that, and ready to make a push here in the big dance, I'm going to go ahead and give Middle Tennessee State about a 60% chance of picking up this win in that 12-5 seed matchup here. All right, guys, the next game that I want to touch on where I'm really high on the double-digit seed is going to be this Wichita State versus Dayton matchup here. Wichita State, I feel like they're vastly underseeded. They probably deserved more in that 6-7 seed range, in my opinion. Obviously, Wichita State not going against the kind of schedule this year that would allow them to pick up a ton of resume wins, but a great team nonetheless that has really dominated action throughout Missouri Valley Conference play. Been very impressive. They went on to win the MVC tournament, but Wichita State, they lost some of their top players from last year's team, but still brought back a good amount of talent and reloaded. Going against another mid-major-ish team in the Dayton Flyers. Dayton has also had their fair share of solid results in the NCAA tournament over the past 5 years or so, with head coach Miller leading them, and also a Dayton squad that has a very strong, experienced backcourt, not necessarily the most dominating front court, but Dayton definitely has a lot of experience in terms of the NCAA tournament. But I just feel like the MVC tends to get underseeded quite often in the NCAA tournament, and it just doesn't feel right that Wichita State is all the way up here at a 10. So I feel like Wichita State has a great chance of picking up this win here. I'm going to put them at about a 60% chance to go on to beat the Dayton Flyers as that 10 seed taking down the 7 seed. And just one more game that I'm going to be touching on in today's video. I want to talk about Winthrop versus Butler. 13 versus 4 matchup here. The Winthrop Eagles coming into this season, very popular pick to win the Big South. They went on to do that as well as win their postseason tournament. You go back to the non-conference, Winthrop winning on the road against a high major team like Illinois. It just shows you that when Winthrop is able to play up to their ceiling, that they can compete with top competition, or not necessarily top competition, but teams from larger conferences that aren't necessarily the best teams from their conference, but able to match up in those scenarios. Winthrop, a team that plays very fast, can light things up on the offensive end, and Winthrop also has one of the more exciting guards in the nation, and he can really light up the scoreboard, averaging about 25 points per game for them. And the Butler Bulldogs, they lost some of their best players from last year, but they've actually been better this season. Butler's stumbling a bit as of late, losing their last 2 games in a row and really showing poorly on the offensive side of the ball in their Big East tournament defeat. So even though Butler has been better this year, somewhat surprisingly than they were last year, I do feel like Butler's going to go on to win this one, but I do think Winthrop has a puncher's chance here. I'm going to put them at about a 35% chance to go on to knock down Butler. So those are kind of some of the higher double-digit seeded teams that I wanted to touch on in this particular video as having some decent shots at going on and winning that first round game. If you want more of this tournament coverage and pick videos, you can click that subscribe button. Any thumbs up are greatly appreciated on the video. And if you're interested in getting more pick content as well as our daily free pick, you can head on over to stumpthespread.com, and I'll put a link to Stump the Spread down in the video description. So thanks, guys, for stopping on in, and we'll see you in the next college basketball tournament video. Bye.